Now to some developments in the polity. The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, and national commissioners have met with collation and returning officers to review the 2023 general election. The commission acknowledged that collation and returning officers worked under challenging circumstances by tediously and manually completing designated forms as provided by law. TVC News Habida Lawal reports.
Election officials are made up of permanent and ad hoc staff of the Independent National Electoral Commission who are directly involved in conducting and supervising the electoral process. These officials have a significant role to play in the electoral process, and how they discharge their duties affect the degree of confidence voters have in the electoral process. Present in this gathering are the 37 state collation officers for the presidential election, as well as many who also doubled as returning officers for the 28 governorship elections. The Commission's expectations at this meeting is to identify areas of strength and weaknesses while deliberating on the necessary reforms that should be introduced going forward.
Many of you have also the cognate experience of this work in terms of result management, having served in similar capacities in at least 3 electoral cycles. Some of you have participated in the electoral process since 2015, and you are involved again in 2019 and 2023.
The resident and collation officers are majorly concerned about security and transportation of electoral materials safely to their destinations.
Once you've read out the results, it's possible, you need to have some cover if there's any problem. I think that was probably the greatest challenge, and then getting to the location.
We emphasize where we had some little hiccups. We look at them and look at solutions that could be preferred to make future elections better.
Certain issues have come to light, and some Nigerians have raised concerns about result management at various levels, while some of the issues are already subject of litigations and therefore subsidies. INEC believe they can be discussed broadly and experiences can be shared on the way forward. Being the first point of call for collation process at the state level, the Independent National Electoral Commission is engaging collation and returning officers who conducted the 2023 presidential election to get their first-hand opinion on how far it fared. Habida Lawal, TVC News, Abuja.
President Bola Tinubu has noted that contemporary and emerging security threats in the West African sub-region is demanding that members must work together to bring peace to the Lake Chad region. Speaking at the graduation ceremony of 291 senior officers at the Armed Forces Command and Staff College, Jaji in Kaduna State, President Tinubu emphasized the need to adopt strategies and tactics to combat mobile and elusive irregular forces that disregard traditional rules of warfare. Lupa Arsim was there and now reports.
The event is the graduation ceremony of 291 officers of Course 45 at the Armed Forces Command and Staff College in Jaji, Kaduna State. The arrival of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signals the commencement of the ceremony. The graduating officers have undergone 49 weeks of leadership and command training, preparing them for tactical and operational level responsibilities. The training, which encompasses various aspects of security and defense, is not exclusive to Nigeria, as officers from 15 allied nations are among the graduates. President Bola Tinubu in his address assures Nigerians that his administration will prioritize and dedicate significant efforts to the provision of sufficient security for all citizens across the country. He spells out his national security objective, saying it will focus on ensuring security, justice and democratic prosperity through the use of state power.
The democratic tranquility and prosperity of our nation shall never change. As Commander-in-Chief, I have given myself the following charge: to deploy the entire machinery of state power to ensure security of our people,
The president believes Nigeria and the neighboring countries in the Lake Chad region must display courage in reforming their military doctrines and practices. He emphasizes that a change in tactics has become necessary because the countries in the region are battling asymmetry threats that disregard established rules of warfare.
We must also be brave enough to reform military doctrine and practice. We contend against mobile, elusive, irregular forces that disdain the normal rule of warfare. This shall require a change in mindset, in strategy, in tactics, in equipment, and in gear.
Awards are given to participants who distinguish themselves in the course of the training. With the newly trained officers ready to take on their new responsibilities, it is hoped that Africa will forge a united front in confronting the security challenges facing the region and foster lasting peace. Lupe Assam, TVC News, Kaduna.
Welcome back. You're still watching Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now to our interview with the guest of the day. I am joined by the former lawmaker representing Kaduna Central Senator District in the 8th Senate, Senator Sani. Tonight we're discussing how to address the inevitable pains of subsidy removal. Senator Sani is an author, Pan-Africanist and human rights crusader. Thank you very much for joining us, Senator.
Thank you for having me.
Right. So before we get into the crux of our discussion tonight, let's talk about you for a minute. You're today a member of the PDP, and many people didn't expect you to switch to PDP. Why did you?
I beg your pardon, what did you say?
You're today a member of the PDP. Many people didn't expect you to switch to PDP. Why did you switch?
Well, first of all, every politician you see is a product of an equation that happened within his own local constituency. I was a founding member of the APC in Kaduna State, and it so happened that within the period I was a member and I served at the National Assembly, my own principles and conviction couldn't tally with the person who was the state governor at that very time. And he made it impossible for many of us who were in that party to be members and to continue to be members. So when you say the party structure is in the hands of a governor and the governor is the leader of the party, does not mean that that governor should dictate to whoever is in that party and everyone becomes his slave. So for that, as a man of conscience and conviction, I'm not in politics for the sake of being in power or contesting election. I'm in politics because I have principles, I have ideals, and I'm also a man with an ideology. So if we cannot live in the same roof, I simply have to give away. He, at that very time, when he was in power, he thinks that everyone should simply bow to him, kowtow to whatever he wants to. We did everything possible to tell him that this is a political party. We all came together to form, and we all have our own equal rights. But they don't want people who are competent and capable. They want loyalists, they want lackeys, they want stooges to bow down to them. I can't be part of that. So for that, I decided to leave the party and then join another party. That was all I did. And I didn't join PDP directly. We went to PRP, People's Redemption Party, which was the party that was rooted in the heritage of our parents, of our history, of our culture. I was there. But when Balarabe Musa was there was crisis in the party, and it became impossible for us to evict the APC out of power. So we decided that let us all join hands together, all the opposition party. Some of us from the PRP joined together with those in the PDP, and then the election came along, and that was it. So I couldn't find myself living under a party with someone who is not a Democrat. I can't do that, so that's why I left.
All right. So would you say your switch was ideological or emotional?
Well, there are a lot of differences we had, and I think the person who was the governor of that time came from a different background from I am. I come from the leftist, socialist, Marxist-Leninist political culture, and he came from the right. And we can find ourselves ideologically from that perspective. And also on the second term is that I have been in the struggle as a civil rights activist. And he was someone who was simply known from 1999 when he was brought in to serve in the federal government. So we come from different backgrounds and we operated at different frequency. Even though the APC gave us a platform, and the APC was a merger. People come from different political tendencies, background, and inclination to form the APC. But we know very well that later, many crises erupted from different states. We had it in Kano, it's in Kaduna, and other states. And then we couldn't stay together, so I have to leave. So that is simply what happened. I wasn't a founding member of the PDP, but for the fact that we needed a coalition, we needed a united front to dislodge the APC out of Kaduna State. And that is why I found myself in the PDP.
All right, so another thing I would like to know is, what is your plan politically? Do you see yourself back in APC or returning to the Senate through your current party?
As far as politics is concerned, you can't predict what will happen the next day. But for the fact that when we move, we hope to achieve a certain goal. And it's not only me. The person who contested the presidential, the governorship candidate of the PDP in Kaduna State is also from APC. And many of those who contested the Senate and the House of Reps seats in the PDP were also from the APC. So you can see how APC lost some of his good people to the PDP in that state. And that was the reason why the 2023 elections came with a different result. The APC was dominant for 8 years, but when the 2023 election came, they lost the 3 senatorial seats to the PDP. Out of 16 members of House of Reps, the PDP won 10. And you can see the presidential election also. The PDP won in Kaduna State, all because many of those who should have provided and gave votes to the APC were driven out because of the high-handedness and tyranny of the governor of Kaduna State that time. We have always reminded him that power is temporary, it's ephemeral, it's transient, and you can see the situation now. After 8 years, he's out, and then the PDP won Kaduna State. And I believe that it's the biggest failure of a governor for you not to win presidential, to provide votes for your presidential candidate. And I know that APC could have beat its chest very well in Kaduna State if they have won the presidential election, but it shows who is on the ground. We won the presidential election in PDP. We also won the senatorial elections and 10 seats out of 16. And it's all the undoing of the APC in that state. So as far as I'm concerned, nobody knows what will happen tomorrow. But for me, I believe that getting out of that party was the best thing we had to do at that very time.
All right, I get that. But Senator, if Asiwaju Tinubu invites you to return to your old party, or, ask you to work for your nation through his government, will you agree?
Well, first of all, my relationship with Asiwaju didn't started with the PDP or the APC. It was rooted in the struggle for June 12th. I think the first time I met him was in the house of Chief M.K. Abiola during the struggle for the revalidation of June 12, 1993 election. And the second time was when I came out of prison after Babangida jailed us for calling for the removal of his government while I was the vice chairman of Campaign for Democracy and Beko was the chairman of Campaign for Democracy. And in 1999, I joined the Alliance for Democracy and I contested the Senate in 2003. and I lost, and he provided support for me at that very time. But Kaduna could not, we couldn't make much headway under the AD. And then we came together under APC, from AC and then to APC. And for now, I believe we had a personal relationship and history, and I always respect him for that. But the issue of calling me to come and serve in his government does not come in. I think there are other better persons, better than me, who can do a lot of good for our country. And for me, I believe that even from my own very house, I can make my own contribution. And I believe that he has started on a good note, and there are many things he has done, but there are also tragic mistakes which they have to be very careful. If not, it can erupt into a crisis. I am one of those who believe that he is actually a president of Nigeria, and that we should all, as citizens, recognize him as a president for now. Even though our party and other people are in court, does not mean that because you are in court, you shouldn't recognize. This is a sovereign country. An election was conducted, and a man is announced to be a winner. He's the president until the court announces otherwise. And then whatever contribution we can make for the progress of the country, we have to do it as patriot and as nationalist. So that is my own way. As for coming back to APC, well, it depends on what we decide as far as Kaduna State is concerned. The man who has led to our exit from the APC is out in Kaduna State, and whatever we decided from that state level is the decision which we are going to take. So it's not for me, but for me, I know very well that with such kind of person, we can never stay in the same roof. We simply don't share anything in common with him.
All right, thank you very much, Senator. Now let's get to our core discussion for tonight. As a country, we're battling with the pains of petrol subsidy removal. But as a former lawmaker, what role do you think the National Assembly can play in this?
Well, first of all, the issue of petroleum subsidy has been with us for almost 4 to 5 decades. Government after government, there was attempts were made to remove that subsidy. And out of the fear of revolt, protest, and dissent from the public, government after government, they found it difficult to remove that subsidy. I have been an advocate of subsidy for decades. We have led protests, we have joined protests in defense of petroleum subsidy. But at a certain time, we have to tell ourselves the home truth. We have been paying subsidy in millions, then in billions, then in hundreds of millions, then in trillions, then to the point that our government is borrowing to pay subsidy. Then we came back and say, hey, let's look at these things from another perspective. Who are the beneficiaries of this subsidy? And why, as an oil-producing country, can't we produce PMS to serve our people? Can't we have an alternative way of providing the necessary energy, fossil fuels to our people without parting away with trillions of naira to rent-seeking middlemen who are simply importing petroleum? And the idea came, and we reasoned from that perspective. Now, it is a fact that subsidy has been removed, but it has not been removed. It's the last government that simply made no provision for it for the second half of the year. Now, this government has inherited no funds to pay subsidy. Then what they could have done, first of all, is to sit down and say that we are heading to the consequences of absence of subsidy. And we must come out with a Marshall Plan, a master plan on how to tackle the consequences of this. Certainly, if you remove subsidy, it's going to reflect on cost of living, it's going to reflect on everything from tuition fees to rent to public transportation and to so many things. So that was not thought of. So the idea, it appears that when subsidy was removed, is then now what can we do to ameliorate the problem, to reduce the hardships and suffering faced by people? Then the idea of 8,000 came, and then we condemned it in totality. Because in a nation where people can't even survive with 30,000 naira minimum wage, talk less of 8,000. What the National Assembly can do, first of all, is to support the idea of removing subsidy, but to ensure the full implementation of making sure that the funds that were allocated for subsidy goes to the people, to the masses, to the downtrodden on the ground. And even before the approval of that 500 billion, there are a number of questions the National Assembly is supposed to ask. First of all, who is going to be in charge of 500 billion? And then how did the government derive at this figure? And how will this money be distributed to the states? And from who is going to be in charge and which structure will that be used? Because if you have 500 billion naira and then you say you distribute it to states, all states are not equal. There are some states that will use the money sent to them to pay the contractors they are owing, to pay the backlog of salaries and arrears and pensions, or to also fund some infrastructure project and use a fraction of it to pay people as a subsidy, as palliative. So to me, the National Assembly should perform oversight function on how this 500 billion naira will be disbursed. This is to avoid the disaster or the tragedy that has happened with the humanitarian ministry as far as distribution of N-Power, trader money, and all these jargons that happen under Buhari administration. So to me, this time around, there must be probity, there must be transparency, there must be accountability, and there must be order and structure in how this money can go to the downtrodden in our society. Most times, if you give it to governors, well, they are the ones who are in charge of their state. But there must be a structure that will ensure that no kobo of this subsidy is diverted to payment of backlog of salaries and pension, or to pay contractors, or to fund some projects that have nothing to do with palliatives. So this is very important. And National Assembly is the only structure of government that can do that for now.
All right, Senator. So based on all you just said, are you on the side of those who say palliative should have been provided before removal of subsidy? And would you say the gains, the pains outweigh the gains?
Well, first of all, it is a courageous act for a government to decide to look at 220 million people and say we are going to pull this subsidy and face the consequences of it. Nigerians are suffering, and what we need now is to make sure that sacrifices is not only directed at the poor people, but those at the upper strata of society, the bourgeoisie class, also make sacrifices. And that if you continue to call on the poor to make sacrifices, then that is unjust and unfair. I am now fully in support of the removal of subsidy. But I want to know how this issue can be addressed in terms of making sure that palliatives goes to the ground. By now, before the removal, government ought to have purchased number of vehicles and distribute to states, or the state government purchase it, and making sure that transportation is eased by virtue of buses and taxis that are provided for people. And the long-term aspect of it is supporting small businesses, also supporting farmers. Palliatives cannot address the problems of poverty in this country. Poverty has been deeply entrenched in the last 8 to 10 years. According to the statistics which we have had last year, 133 million Nigerians are in deeper poverty. And as such, sharing 8,000 to them will never address it. I don't know how even they come with that figure. That clearly shows the disconnect between those in the position of authority, power, comfort, and privilege with people on the ground to think that 8,000 can solve the problem. But I'm glad that the government now has seen the wisdom in reversing that thinking. Now there should be a step-by-step implementation. First is the short-term measure. Increase the wages of public servants, and then support small businesses, support farmers, make transport available to people, and making sure that other means of transportation that is controlled by the government is also made affordable, like the train service is also affordable by poor people. So the difference between the hardship we are facing now and the hardships we have been facing under Buhari administration is that we live a life of falsehood and deception under Buhari because we borrow money to pay subsidy. It's like borrowing to eat. You will keep borrowing and be eating. There will be a time nobody is going to borrow you money to go and eat. So we can't continue that. The pains under Buhari is that of the pain of cancer. And now the pain we are facing now is the pain of chemotherapy to address the problem. And we hope that this hardship has a time limit. People are ready to make sacrifices, but there should be a time to which we will see that these hardships and sacrifices is coming to an end. It cannot be eternal. We can't continue to make sacrifices. And one thing is that if people see the government also making sure that those at the upper strata of society are also making sacrifices and are also being made to pay for the mistakes, the wrongs, and the tragedy of the past, people will be much comfortable. For example, if the president now initiated a process of recovering looted money under Buhari administration, people will say, now we are talking. But if those who were part of that government are simply left off the hook, and it's the masses that are paying for the prices of reform, then it's not going to be fair. As it is now, it's as if masses have inherited suffering from that government, and those who were in a comfortable position under government have also inherited comfort and privilege. So let the people, the masses, the downtrodden, see clearly that they are not the only ones making sacrifices, and then we will now make progress. Government can achieve a lot if they ensure that the plans for this subsidy removal is well implemented. If the money that should go to subsidy is now going to the people, is going to infrastructure, is going to health, is going to education, is going to agriculture, and people can see it, is that transferring money from waste to something that people can see visibly. So that is the best way to go for now.
Thank you very much for staying with politics tonight. Tonight we're discussing how to address the inevitable pains of subsidy removal. And I've been speaking with former lawmaker representing Kaduna Central Senatorial District in the 8th Senate, Senator Sani. All right, distinguished. Now, the effect of subsidy removal has been compounded by sliding value of the naira. Do you agree that the flotation of the naira should have been delayed?
Well, when a new government comes into office and it has policies, programs, as stated in its own manifestos, there is no better time to start implementing that program than in the first few months of its taking over office. The achievement we have recorded in the energy sector is the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill that was passed, which made the NNPC now a limited liability company that was set out to make profits. And I'm so convinced and glad that the management of NNPC under the Managing Director Melekeri have made a lot of reforms, which led to the discovery of oil in northern part of Nigeria, and also their efforts to address the issue of oil theft in Niger Delta, and so many things, the gas pipeline and so many things. But on this issue of subsidy, I think it has been so difficult for any government to implement until this time around. So I'm happy that this has taken place. What we fear has happened. Now, how do we get out of it and make progress from this point? I think that is what is most important. For the government, the most important achievement now will be to say we have been able to remove subsidy, and we have also been able to limit the hardship and suffering experienced by people, and we have been able to recover money that has been wasted on subsidy for generations, and this is the money that is recovered and how it is being used. So that will be a clear indication that we have made sacrifices and we have gained from that sacrifices which we have made. If not that, well, I don't see anything that can happen. If government don't take seriously the issue of addressing poverty and making sure that the palliative address suffering and hardship faced by people are going to revolt. This no protest you have seen. There will be the largest protest which this government has never seen. People will come out on the street in mass protest that will shake the foundation of this country once the poverty has reached a level where people cannot tolerate it. But the government can curtail that, and that is making sure that this money that is reserved for subsidy, for palliative, goes directly to people that are affected and people that should benefit from it. I think that is the way out of where we are now.
All right, so talking about how the government should limit this hardship, what do you think needs to be done by governments to alleviate the suffering of the masses following aftershocks of this removal?
Well, first of all, government should set up a structure at the federal, state, and local government levels. Let people identify who is specifically in charge of the palliatives in the federal level, at the state level, and at the local government level. And when you have such a structure, every kobo that goes that should go to the people will go through that structure, and then it goes to the masses directly. Now, how can that be done? Well, I've seen what they have done in the National Council of States and also the government, the plan which they have. When we should divide this into two, the short term and the long term. The short term is to increase the wages of the minimum wage to an acceptable and affordable limit. You don't just make statements that we have increased minimum wage when there is no money to pay that wages, like it was done under Buhari administration. Many states, on paper, they have 30,000 naira minimum wage, but they can't even pay 18,000. So that has to be addressed. Secondly, there should be public transportation. Government should buy buses and taxis and hand it over to unions and state very clearly that these are the prices, these are the fees people need to pay transport fare. I've seen the governor of Bayelsa State and that of Borno State sharing vehicles, and that is a very good start, and as far as I'm concerned. And then thirdly, there should be support for agriculture because food is a major issue now. And support for farmers to be able to produce food, and making sure also there is enough security to protect our farmers, particularly in the northwest and northeastern part of Nigeria, where now they pay bandits to allow them to go to farms to harvest or plant their crops. I think that has to be clearly addressed. The next thing that has to be done is the issue of conditional cash transfer. Well, the register, there should be a register of the vulnerable in our society and how they can all benefit directly by crediting their account. And as for the train services, there is need to lower the train ticket so that people can be able to access the services of Nigerian Railways. And these are the short time that need to be done. The long time has to do with investment in all sectors. If we said we are saving 1.5 trillion every month from subsidy, let people clearly see where this money is going to. If you are constructing 10,000 houses for every state, let people see it. If you are investing in health, in education, in roads, let people see it clearly. If you end up handing over monies for palliative to state governors, the first beneficiary will be those who supported them to be in office, and that is their political party. So if you do that, you will still be creating more problems for yourself. If this removal of subsidy and the consequences of it turns out negative, it is the president that is going to be blamed. And if it comes out positive, I mean, everyone will share the glory. So it is for the president to know that the buck stops on his table. He must ensure that there is a structure so that funds that are allocated to palliatives don't go to settling backlog of pensions and salaries, which the new governors have inherited. Many states are indebted, like in Kaduna State now. We are the second most indebted state in the country, and the funds to continue the activities of governance is something that is very challenging. So if money is given to other states with such kind of trouble, the first thing will be the priorities which the states are facing, and may not be palliative. So a structure is very important to address the problems we are going to face today. And if this distribution of palliatives fails, then there will be protests in the country. And I think that is not something which a government is going to have. Look at what's happening in Kenya. The new government of William Ruto has implemented tax reforms and other forms of, but people are already in the street because there wasn't a serious measures to tackle the implications of these reforms that are supposed to be. So we should learn from what is happening in Kenya to avert the similar situation happening in this country. But the removal of subsidy is a courageous act. But next thing is that it can only be marked as a success if those that are suffering, those that are in hardship today, are being attended to by the funds that will be allocated to them. And the National Assembly has a duty to make sure that this goes down to the masses.
The president has dropped the idea of distribution of 8,000 naira to 12 million Nigerians. How will you react to this?
You see, he came from the trenches. And if there is anyone who has organized and funded protests in Nigeria in the last 35 years, is the president of this country. He was a protester, he led protest, and he is a major dissenter in history of this country, and he knows the implication of people who are still in the battlefield. Many of those whom he has fought with for democracy are still in the trenches and have not retired and are not in the position of power and are not shy of coming out to the street to lead another protest. So the decision by the government to withdraw the idea of 10,000 naira is positive. It shows that they are listening and they are sensitive and they are also mindful of the implication of that 8,000, because I call that 8,000 an attempt to almajiranize in court the country, turn everyone into a beggar. But the idea of the act of the government, the response of withdrawing this 8,000 shows the government is listening. And I think they shouldn't take too much long in coming out with an acceptable. Government cannot give everyone 1 million naira because we don't have money for that. But at least there should be an acceptable amount that should go to Nigeria. And I think the dialogue going on between the government and the labor is very important. And oil is an important lifeline for Nigeria. And for a nation of 220 million people, at this time, we need a new vision. We need a leadership that will be able to withstand the consequences of what may happen today for the progress and future of Nigerians and the future Nigerians. So I believe that this sacrifice should bear fruit, and the only way to do that is to succeed and not reverse back to the subsidy regime, because there is virtually not money to share to people who are calling themselves marketers again.
All right, Senator. So back to one of the points you raised earlier, and that's conditional cash transfer. I mean, this has worked in other countries, but why is it problematic here in Nigeria?
Well, it is problematic here in Nigeria because our corruption is deeply entrenched. I can give you an example. There was, in the last dispensation, there was an attempt to send money to people, persons with disability. And then there was an initiative to compile a list of people who are living with disabilities. And for that, many people, in an attempt to get access to that money, claimed to be disabled by the fact that they will say they are dumb or they are deaf. So most times you see people who are benefiting from such conditional cash transfer were simply collaborators of the people who are sending out the alerts to the people. So it was tainted with corruption. Conditional cash transfer can only happen if we have a database of the vulnerable in our society. And it's possible to have it if there is a serious collaboration between the state, federal government, local governments, the civil society, and the unions, trade unions. We can reach out, women groups, they can reach out and get the real number of people who deserve such kind of handout. So making sure that we have a credible database for the vulnerable in our society is the first step before you start sharing money to people who don't deserve it. I think that is very important. And we don't have too much time to do it. People now are suffering. People can't pay their rent. People can't pay the tuition fees of their children. It's been very difficult for people to move from one point to another. So there is no an eternity of time to give government to start thinking of how to solve this problem. I think the earlier they start, the better, and setting up that structure is very important. Who is responsible for this palliative, and how will this palliative be shared, and to whom? This is very important, and the earlier the better, because people are becoming restless. People are not protesting now because they are giving the government the benefit of doubt. But you see, you can't overstretch the patience of people. To a certain point, when they see that nothing is coming, then they will say, okay, well, we need to go and protest. And so for the period of time which the people have given the government is for them to use that time to make sure that this issue is being addressed. That is the issue of poverty, the issue of consequences of withdrawal of subsidy has been addressed. But subsidy is now history. What is ahead of us is how do we tackle the implication of that withdrawal.
All right, but Senator, overall, how you describe the way President Tinubu has handled the matter so far?
Well, first of all, the way he has handled it is, well, I will have to appreciate his courage in removing the subsidy, because the last government were not able to do it. Though I've had some spokesperson of the last government said if they have withdrawn, that Tinubu could not have won election. But they have 8 years to withdraw it, which they couldn't. Why couldn't he have withdrawn it in the first tenure of his government when nobody was even contesting with him in 2019? So simply that was an excuse. So the boldness in removing the subsidy is something you can commend the government on. But secondly, the tragedy was that the plan were haphazard. There was no coordination, there's no constancy, there is no articulation in terms of the handling the consequences of this subsidy. But also for the fact that government has withdrawn the 8,000, we hope that they will come with a better idea. But the most commendable thing is the dialogue process that has been going on between the government and Labour. I think never at a time in the history of Nigeria has the Labour felt at home with the president and removing a subsidy without an oshimole or type of protest on the street. So I think this is the government that has been able to achieve that, but does not mean that the patience of the people is endless. If you come to the next 2, 3, 4 months and there is nothing on the ground, you will have protests in the country. And the earlier that is averted, the better. But now, the strategy, the steps taken by the government is in order. But it shouldn't be taking too long before people should be reached out.
So now with the new pump price of petrol at 617 naira per litre, which has led to increase in cost of goods and services, what other measures do you think the federal government should institute to support vulnerable Nigerians?
Well, the good thing about it is that before the 2023 election, all the three major presidential candidates, Asuwaju, Atiku, and Peter Obi, have made it very clear that they are going to withdraw subsidy. I think the only presidential candidate that refused to make that pledge is my friend and brother, Yoweri Sowore. He maintained that subsidy will go on. But the major candidates have made it very clear that they will withdraw subsidy. But now, people don't understand what withdrawal of subsidy was at that very time, perhaps. But withdrawal of subsidy will come with a price. Because when government is no more funding subsidy, it means that market forces will control the prices of the commodity, which now is the PMS. And this petroleum, for the fact that we don't have functional refineries for 8 years, the government of President Buhari was unable to build refineries, and for the fact that we have to import it, and you cannot import petroleum products with Naira, you have to import it with foreign currency. And for the fact that the central bank has now said Naira should float against the dollar, it means that government will also not be subsidizing the Naira. And if Naira is not being subsidized, certainly it will be left to fight and find its own way, its own level. And as long as the value of Naira keeps going down, and dollar will be going up, and then at the end of the day, it is the dollar that will be used to purchase petroleum products that will be shared to the country. So for now, it's possible. If Naira goes up, if the value Naira rises, there is a possibility that the prices of petroleum product will go down. If Naira plunges down, the prices will go up. Well, this simply, I'm not an economist, but this is simply what market forces is all about. We are in a phase in our history where reform programs are introduced, which will be very painful to everyone. But we hope at the end is going to produce a result. These reforms we are particularly experiencing. This is not the first time. Babangida regime tried to implement this kind of reforms. Devaluing the value of Naira, retrenching workers, removing subsidy, which are all conditionalities of World Bank and IMF. But for now, we hope that this time around it will succeed. Until the Naira stabilizes, the prices of petroleum or petrol or PMS will continue to fluctuate as it is now. Because in those times, Naira, when it was selling at 400 or 500, is the CBN that was subsidizing it. I can remember at a certain time, the former CBN governor, he said they are defending the dollar, Naira, with about 3 to 4 to 500 million dollar every month, or was it quarterly, to show up. So Naira was not operating on its real value under the last administration. Now it is left to fight for its own life. And
so, Senator, let me quickly get you to react to this. Hiking fuel prices, volatile and dependent on the international market. But what can Nigeria do to get out of this trap in a few minutes?
Well, we can get out of this trap. First of all, they need to have an experienced and visionary economic team, and that will set a clear agenda for this administration, which will include addressing the pains of reform and seeing also the way forward. And I've seen that there is an intervention in addressing our tax regime, and petroleum is removed, price removed. So now the priorities of the government should be tackled: education, agriculture, science and technology, health, industry. We must ensure that we export more to get more dollars to this country. That is
Thank you very much,
the way out.
Thank you very much, Senator. We're out of time. Thank you so much. I've been speaking with a former lawmaker, Representing Kaduna Central Senatorial District in the 8th Senate, Senator Sani, tonight to discuss the inevitable pains of subsidy removal and how the government must address this. Thank you very much for coming on Politics Tonight. It is an honor having you on the program. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. Get in touch with us on Twitter at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke OO using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. Join us for the repeat episode at midnight and on Monday for another edition of Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a great weekend.